You're listening to the Born to Kick-Ass podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickass.com/episode 62.
Welcome to the Born to Kick-Ass podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Herbert Nitsch is the greatest freediver of all time, current freediving world record holder and deepest man on Earth. Herbert can hold his breath for more than 9 minutes and has set a total of 33 world records across all of the 8 recognised freediving disciplines. On the 6th of June 2012, Herbert dove to a world record 253.2 metres, or 830 feet, in the No Limits sled-dive discipline. On the ascent, at 80 metres, Herbert temporarily fell asleep due to nitrogen narcosis and consequently missed the critical 1-minute underwater decompression stop. Upon surfacing, Herbert was alert and asked for a mask to immediately return underwater to recompress on pure oxygen, but it was too late. While decompressing underwater, Herbert felt the onset of severe decompression sickness, which would eventually result in multiple brain strokes. Herbert arrived comatose at hospital and his future did not look good. With a prognosis of remaining a wheelchair-bound, care-dependent patient, he dismissed himself from long-term facilitated care and took his healing into his own hands. Today, against all odds, Herbert is fit, training and freediving again. Enjoy the interview. Herbert Nitsch, welcome to the Born to Kick-Ass podcast.
Hello, hi.
Now, you're one of, you are the greatest freediver of all time. Freediving's a sport that I guess it's a really niche sport. But it's, when I sort of think of freediving, it scares the crap out of me. It's not only is it a very physical sport, and probably one of the most dangerous sports in the world, there's a lot of mental challenges that freedivers have to face, going against their instincts to breathe and diving down, sort of. It is quite a unique sport.
I think it is a mental sport. It's all about being mentally in control. It's second important is the physical part. Of course, you need to be able to control your body efficiently. Dangerous. I don't find it's dangerous. It's or extreme even. I think if you have to do some rudimentary precautions, it's actually a very safe sport.
Now, you've got 33 world records across all of the freediving disciplines. I believe is there 8 recognised different disciplines within freediving?
Yeah, with the biggest organization, there's 8 disciplines. There's one I do outside this organization because it doesn't exist there. But with this organization, there is 8 disciplines.
And you've got world records in all of the disciplines, which is it's quite incredible. So how did you actually get into freediving? Like, when did you discover that?
That was a big coincidence, I would call it, that the airline, which took me to Egypt for a diving safari, scuba diving safari, lost all my luggage, including my diving gear. And then I spent 10 days on a diving boat without scuba gear, but in the hand luggage, I had an underwater camera, and I spent most of the time taking pictures underwater, just on snorkeling, I called it. I didn't even know that freediving as a sport existed. And then it was just a friend who observed me and asked me how deep and how long I can go. And I said, well, I don't know. I take pictures. And he challenged me. And afterwards, after this vacation, he told me, well, you were just 2 meters short of the Austrian record in freediving. I said, what is freediving? Because it wasn't well known, especially in Austria, in a landlocked country.
Yeah.
Where diving is not so known. And even though I saw the film, The Big Blue, which I found is a fabulous film, but back then I thought it's purely fiction, because I thought it's humanly impossible to hold your breath so long or dive so deep as I did in this movie from Luc Besson. And then this guy said, well, buy some decent fins and set an Austrian record. And more or less, that's what I did. I first had to learn that there is some freediving even going on in Austria. But then the Austrian champion didn't really want me to make an Austrian record. So I soon joined in an international scene, and I set my first world record then, skipping the Austrian record.
You just went straight for the world record.
Yeah,
Jeez.
because I figured, okay, no Austrian record, I go for the world record.
So how long were you doing freediving before you attempted the world, or before you got your first world record?
A little short of a year, I think.
A year?
So it was rather quick, because, well, freediving, it was just a hobby for me. That people think that this was my main profession and my main focus, whereas this was a hobby for a long, long time. And just on the side of my job as an airline pilot, I did this in my spare time. So 1 year, in my vacation of 5 weeks, and of these 5 weeks, I probably spent 2 or 3 weeks on just for fun, and another 2 weeks maybe on freediving.
So if we even rewind a bit further back prior to you discovering freediving, were you fairly fit in your own right? Were you quite active or like an athlete already?
I was always into water sports, particular, and fit in general, doing endurance on bicycle, on inline skates, water skiing. I was fanatic about windsurfing. And then I did for some while competitive swimming, which helped me also in the freediving, of course. And this general fitness, I think it's one key element to keeping fit every day is that, that's very important. That your body is the only thing you have. And the most important thing you have. And I think there's nothing more important than to keep your body fit.
Now, a lot of the sports that you mentioned sort of growing up, it really gives off a cardio-based, a lot of the sports are heavily cardio-based. If someone's has quite good cardio, do you reckon that can translate well into the freediving world? Or is it just completely...
I think good cardio is a good foundation for becoming a good freediver, yes. I also did some weightlifting and like push-ups, pull-ups, and some weights beside my cardio exercise. And being fit certainly helps in freediving. But most important, or more important, especially in the beginning, is the mental aspect. Because you can be as fit as you can, it doesn't you're not successful if you can't control it mentally. Only once you reach a certain level, the physical part becomes important as well, of course.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, the mental part is actually more important.
When you first got into freediving, were you, because I know there's different types of, the different disciplines in freediving, did you specialize in a particular one or two disciplines initially? Did you have like a specialty?
In the beginning, I was more on pool disciplines, not only because, I was in a landlocked country, but also because I had asthma and chronic bronchitis. Therefore, I thought I wasn't capable of equalizing deep because of these lung issues I had. So in the beginning, I focused on pool disciplines like dynamic. It's called swimming lanes or diving lanes underwater as far as you can in the pool, up and down, or just holding your breath without any motion.
Yeah. And how many laps could you do underwater or without breathing?
That was a long time ago. That was my first record without fins. That was, I believe, 106 meters in Geneva.
Yeah.
That was so long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, geez, 106 meters.
For me, at the moment, I couldn't even comprehend that because I was going there like a total beginner almost. And I knew I was getting good at it. But 1 second. Oh, no, sorry. It was 131 meters.
Yeah.
Not 106, yeah. I don't know where I got it from. And that was, of course, without fins. Swimming up and down in 25-meter pool.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the question again? Sorry.
I was just sort of asking. So initially you started off doing freediving in like pool, like holding your breath and going for distance.
Yeah. In the beginning I did distance, swimming with fins, without fins. But my main motivation was always to dive deep. Yeah. But because of asthma and chronic bronchitis, I couldn't go deep. I couldn't equalize. The doctors told me that's an incurable disease. And throughout freediving, in the beginning, I learned a bit more about my body and also about my disease. And I figured out a way how to heal myself without any medicine. And to overcome that totally. And then I could focus on the deep diving, which I did, because for me, freediving is about deep diving.
Yeah. And how did you overcome the asthma? Did you have any particular breathing techniques or?
Breathing and diving and breath hold techniques. I kind of experimented with it a bit to find out how to tweak and fine tune the body and the breathing apparatus. For example, it's at least to diving medicine well known about diving reflex. Diving reflex is something that is many aspects of it, like the heart is flowing down automatically, the blood is shifting from the extremities to the core and so on. But what is not known to medicine is how it works and why it works. It's just something that is automatically happening. But I learned how to influence it, fine-tune it, train it, and even induce it before going in the water. And you might wonder how this helped me on the asthma and bronchitis. Well, one part of the diving reflex is that the blood vessels in the lungs swell up And this caused the debris to detach from the lungs, which then I could cough up. For example, I was doing that even in the pool back in Austria because I didn't have sea access, which is a lot better, salt air. But I just exhaled completely at the surface and doing some technique called reverse packing, where you actually suck out the air from your lungs even more, and then dive down to the pool was only 5 meters. But because of the negative pressure on the lungs, you start to dive reflex already. And this dive reflex caused all the slime and debris to detach in the lungs. And when coming up, I had to cough up all the saliva, the debris from the lungs. I did this a few times only. And at some later time again, and totally cleared everything.
Yeah.
That sounds very simple, is very simple, and can be achieved without any medicine, which I did have to take, which didn't help at all.
With your breath training, like on land, how often did you focus your training specifically on breathing during your career? Was it, like I'm talking on when you're on land, were you doing sort of breath control techniques and breathing techniques just all day, every day, or how much time were you dedicated to?
No, not really. Because first of all, in the beginning, it was a pure hobby. So I didn't focus on it at all. And then this hobby became more serious, of course. But also because I didn't take it serious in the beginning, I learned that it takes only a very short time to adapt. And I kept this rhythm of only training for a week before some dives. So I did some dry training at home with breathing 1 week only. And like in the beginning, I did some less efficient training, and I fine-tuned that to really nail it down to making it as short and as efficient as possible. Coming up with a training plan for myself, only doing about 1 hour a day for a week before the dive. On the couch in front of TV. So I think most people can do that.
And can you step us through that? What did it involve? Like, well, if you're in front of the TV, or if listeners wanted to...
It involves a TV, shallow and funny sitcom I used, like 2.5 Men or Big Bang Theory. And then laying comfy on the couch, half sitting, half laying position, and then doing short breath-ups, which are actually not so important, but maybe a little more than breathing more than a bit necessary. So you breathe off the CO2, which causes you to have less urge to breathe, which makes you hold your breath longer. So, and in the beginning, I did this all on inhale. Then I found that it's a lot more efficient to do an exhale, actually. The time is shorter, but because I do it more often in a shorter time, it's more efficient. So I did all my breath holds, couch training, I call it, on empty lungs. So I exhale and then hold my breath. Maybe in the beginning only for 1 or 2 minutes, and then I breathe up again. Now always try to keep the breathing up the same time as I hold my breath before. So then I hold my breath again, and eventually I would keep it increasing, maybe beyond 4 minutes. And and then after like an hour or a little more or a little less, I stopped. And that was basically it, just holding the breath on empty lungs several times behind each other. And this for 1 week only. In the beginning, it's painful. You suffer because you really have to push yourself to hold your breath. But after a few days in, it really pays off that you feel, in the beginning, you feel like, well, this isn't going nowhere. And even though I knew I did this many, many times, I had the same feeling like, this is not working at all. But then after some time, it's like, boom, and it goes easy and long and makes a big, big step.
Yeah. After you practice this over many years, do you sort of then come to the point where that reflex to breathe in sort of goes away, or you sort of master that breathing in reflex? Do you sort of master that? I guess that instinct of wanting to breathe in. Do you sort of gain control over that reflex?
Yeah, this so-called my couch training is something to master that. That is a tool how to learn, how to endure, and how to accept that breath hold, that urge to breathe, let's say. Yep. And then, of course, when taking the water, you don't waste the time of getting acquainted because you did it already before on the couch.
Do you also find that with your breath control that you can lower your heartbeat? Is that like a result of mastering breath, sort of controlling or lowering your heartbeat from beating really quickly to a more relaxed state? Is that
lowering the heart rate sounds very essential. It's actually passive so much, but the other things are way more important, that you can control the the blood pressure, and the oxygen consumption itself, because the heartbeat is related to the oxygen consumption, but more or less an indicator, yes. But freedivers go beyond this confirmation of the low heartbeat to use less oxygen. And other parts of the body to be able to control are far superior to that.
I've seen some devices you can buy from sort of sports stores that you just put them in your mouth, and when you're driving to work, you can breathe in and out, and they're sort of designed they're breath training devices and possibly to stretch your lungs. Do you find that those sort of devices would have any benefit at all?
Yeah, I've heard of them, but I don't believe in them at all. It might be beneficial, or it is probably beneficial, but I think there's way better ways to work efficiently on the breathing apparatus than that.
With lung capacity, you've got a massive lung capacity, don't you? What does the normal sort of person have normally?
Well, I didn't have that from the get-go, because in the beginning, my lung capacity was all but good. And the average would probably be about 7 liters. And through some lung stretching and breathing exercises, I managed to go up to 10 liters. And with a special technique called packing or buccal pumping, I can fill an extra 5 liters, so in total 15 liters. And this increased over the time, of course, not just like from the get-go. So in the beginning, my lung capacity was quite normal or even below normal.
Now, with packing, tell us about that technique. Are you basically packing extra air into your lungs, sort of forcing your lungs to expand like a balloon? Is that pretty much what it is? Or?
Yeah, similar. You're using your mouth and epiglottis as a piston to swallow and push like a pump, sip by sip in the lungs, pushing extra air in the lungs. Because normally when inhale, you can only passively inhale by just increasing the volume with the rib cage. But by using this packing technique, you can actually push sip by sip air in the lungs. and therefore you can stretch them. Of course, you don't overstretch it, but you just make it more flexible, and therefore it can increase in size, but also it can decrease in size. It's actually very important as a freediver because to equalize deep, the most important is not the maximum, it's the minimum of lung capacity, which was actually quite high because of my disease I had early on, that the residual volume is important to be very low for equalizing deep. But one thing is to pack additional air on the surface to have more volume to equalize the depth. But also, even more important is to be able to reduce further, because this air, once it gets compressed, you have to get air out of your lungs to push in the sinus or stash in the tube and equalize the eardrums. Yeah. So the most limit for deep freedivers is actually the equalization, not the breath hold so much.
What about hyperventilating? Is that a technique that you use at all?
Funny you ask that. In the very beginning, I didn't know better, so I did it. And I was told by many experts that you should never do this, and this is not beneficial at all. And they even pointed out, this is not the way to do it. And you know what? I still do it, and I find it absolutely essential.
So essentially, with hyperventilating, is the goal for hyperventilating to just increase the oxygen content within your blood? Is that sort of the goal of that? Is that sort of the goal?
Not at all, because the oxygen level in your blood is always close to 100%, 99 to 100%. So it can't really increase that. What it can decrease is the urge to breathe. And this is caused by CO2 building up. When you burn oxygen, you're actually converting it to CO2. And the buildup of CO2 is causing the urge to breathe. And by hyperventilating, you expel more CO2. So the CO2 value in the body gets lower, and therefore it gets to the urge to breathe level later.
Now, I just wanted to sort of talk about not the 253-metre world record, but we'll maybe talk about another world record to start with. Maybe give us a bit of an overview of how you approach one of your world records, like in the moment sort of leading up to descending. What do you go through, I guess, physically? I'm guessing you do a lot of packing, and how do you sort of prepare yourself mentally as well when you're about to attempt a world record dive?
Well, let me take this apart and start a bit earlier maybe. First, I analyze that record or the competition and the discipline I want to do and take apart bit by bit in detail as possible. So training on the weakest link. For example, most people tend to train something they're good at, but they don't like to train on something they're not so good at. And the train is only so strong as the weakest link. So taking it apart, identifying the weakest link and working on that to make it a strong one. This is, I think, one key point of many things in life. That not only focusing what you're good at, but also on what you're not so good at. And then, for example, for dynamic swimming up and down the pool, I took it apart by training just the endurance on the stationary bike, on inline skates, and general fitness. The muscles actually in the fitness center, the breath hold on the couch, and only the technique in the pool. And I trained in the pool maybe 2-3 times only. And then in the competition, I put it all together and then made the record. I think if you let's say waste your time in training altogether, you're not efficient because you don't focus on the weakest link. And also mentally, it is very important in freediving in general that I use a technique where, well, let me start from there. When you do some competition record, you have all the focus on you. Like you have a startup, you have spectators, you have judges, you have safety divers, and you have to be that calm, because anything else but that calm, you would use and burn oxygen. So you have to be in a state like on a lazy Sunday morning, waking up and saying, oh, it's Sunday, turn back around. And this state you have to get in the moment of the competition or record. And to achieve this mental state is actually quite a challenge. And what I found out, which works good for me, is to imagine, close my eyes and imagine everything, the whole picture around me. Like imagining the whole scene and seeing myself even in there from a bird's eye view. And I'm just a spectator, so therefore I don't need to be worried or excited. I'm just watching. And this I found out to zoom out of myself. That helped me a lot to stay calm, because you can only achieve something in freediving if you're absolutely calm. There's a quote I heard so many times in German, which in the beginning I couldn't make any sense out of it, which means translate in German, in der Ruhe liegt die Kraft. The calm the power lays in the calm. Yep. And I didn't really know what to do with that. But it's actually true to that sense. If the more relaxed you are, the more you can handle at the moment workload and also the less oxygen use. And throughout life, that whatever it is, if you stay calm, you can perform more. Like in the beginning, in my pilot career, I learned a very structural approach of analyzing emergencies and doing bits by bits at a time without getting stressed out. Because if you're stressed out, you become less efficient. And that would be an extreme form when freediving. You have to be as calm as possible, not to use any oxygen. Because it's not only the brain directly, but also not to use any muscles unnecessary. For example, if you are on the surface in the water, you naturally want to counteract the wave movement with a movement of the body. It's totally unnecessary. If you see beginners and advanced freedivers, you will see immediately the difference underwater, where beginners would move around and balance their waves, and advanced freedivers would just let the body take by the waves.
It's fascinating listening to the knowledge that you're dropping.
Sorry, get a bit carried away.
No, I think it's fascinating. And you also you've held your breath for over 9 minutes as well, haven't you?
Yeah, once. But breath holding, it's called static apnea, where you lay in a pool and just hold your breath without any motion as long as possible, because any motion causes oxygen consumption. Therefore, you don't lay still as long as possible. This was challenging for me to I do this discipline too. So it was part of the competition in the early days. is not so much anymore. It is something people can grasp, and also it seemed to me extreme. But for me, okay, I've done it too, and I've done it and over it. But my main motivation was always deep diving, where static is part of it, but not essential at all.
Tell us about equalising. Are there different techniques to equalise at all? And how often would you equalise when you're descending?
I think equalization is something you hear about from every freediver, because there's Castilian's equalization variants of it. There's a few very distinct differences, yes, like different techniques, but to each technique there is small variances of these techniques. For example, where to start, where to end. An easy equalization technique is that you have to actually take air through your mouth and press it in the oxygen tube or in sinuses. And this can be achieved by forcing it directly from the lungs, or putting it in your mouth first and making the pressure from your mouth. But also there's different techniques like storing the air in the mouth, because at some point your lungs can't exhale any more air because of reaching the residual volume because of the pressure surrounding it. So therefore, if you breathe out the air in your mouth before and store it there before, you can actually access more and deeper air to equalize with. So that's a so-called mouth-fill technique, where you would dive down and fill your mouth to a balloon as much as you can, to use at a later state, sip by sip, to equalize with. But there is different techniques of how to get the air there, just by forcing it out with the abdomen to do reverse packing, sucking it out with your epiglottis as a piston, and so on. And also different variants of when to do it, or do it once, or do it more often. Like you do it in small increments to inflate the mouth bit by bit as you go deeper. And at some point, I try to reach at the same point where I can't put any more air in, and also at the same point getting it maximum inflated. And as I told, it's also essential and different techniques how to fill the mouth. So that's it. That's something in itself.
Now, when you start to descend, I believe there's a point, I don't know what sort of depth it is, but it might be 15 meters or something, from the surface, that you've actually
Sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
Let me continue on this equalization. One technique I used for quite some long time that was very commonly known, but then at some point it was really hard in the preparation, also in doing the dive itself. And some really beginner freediver was looking at me practicing that on dry land just before the dive. And looked at me, hey, that looks really, really difficult and stressful. And he said, why don't you try this and that? And I was like, I don't know, that doesn't work. I think I've never tried, but I will, okay. And the water there wasn't so deep. So anyway, I could practice on the equalization in the shallow. And then by trying his technique, that was so controversial to any equalization I did, I learned something else. And I learned a secret about equalization from that, which I had to go over many, many times because it's so contradictory to what I was used to. And what I was saying about that, you can learn from experts, yes. You can learn from old foxes, but you also can learn from young guns. This guy had no experience over the freediving, but it's about listening and gathering all the information and brewing your own soup and finding your own way to succeed. Because if you follow the path someone else took, you can only be as good as them. Yeah. Not if you find your own way. And this is true with many, many things in life. If it is business or whatever, if you do something as everybody else does, it's hard to be better.
Do you ever get...
And only because things are done all the time, the same way, it's not necessarily meaning that's the best way to achieve the goal.
Do you ever get scared when you're about to do a dive? Does fear ever sort of appear in your mind?
There's absolutely no room to have fear or even anxiety. If at all, I would not call it fear. I would call it respect or discomfort, which I do have, of course, in training sometimes, especially in the beginning of my training. Like, for example, if a train at the lake is cold, spooky, and so on. So it takes some time to overcome that. But at some point, when you push it to overcome it, you actually start enjoying it and enjoying to have overcome that. And then when there is the competition or record, there's no room for that because you've done it before, at least mentally. Because one part of my preparation is I don't really do the record even close to it in training. I do it mentally. I do my training only to 80% or maybe 90%, but only during competition I go the full 100%. But then before doing the dive, I go over it mentally as detailed as possible, going over it step by step, including things like putting on my suit, relaxing, trying to find shadow, the breathe up, the whole dive itself, in detail as possible, and imagining it. And then when I actually do it, I don't do it the first time. I do it the second time because I've already mentally done it. Yeah. And because I do the second time, I'm less excited. And also, because I'm less excited, it's easier even. So it's a win-win situation. So that's a crucial part of imagining it, going there, and performing it then.
What's the pressure like on your body when you're down really deep, like 100 meters or even further than that? What's the pressure like on your lungs and your internal organs and your heart? What's that feel like?
Are you in bars or in PSIs?
Either, but...
Well, bars is easier because it's linear and more applicable, easy to calculate. Well, it's every 10 meters, the pressure increases by 1 bar. And people that cannot relate to bars and pressure, in the car tire, you have 3 to 4 bars maybe. So that will equal a pressure of 20 to 30 meters because you have to take 1 bar from the surface and every 10 meters add 1 bar. So at 10 meters, you have 2 bars. At 30 meters, you have 4 bars and so on.
Yeah.
So the pressure is kind of intense. But what you don't really realize so much if you don't dive, at least, that the pressure on the body you don't feel at all, just on the cavities. The cavities meaning lungs, sinus, and extraction tube, eardrum. And like in the extremities, on your legs, arms, you don't feel the pressure at all because the body is mainly made of water anyway. And water is not compressible, at least not very much, especially in those shallow depths we go to. If you go to a few thousand meters, that's a different story. But if I'm talking about a few hundred meters, it's not. So the cavities in the body is where the pressure does have an effect. And your sinuses, you equalize, and your lungs get compressed. And the lungs, theoretically, at least according to doctors, have a depth limit, but it doesn't take in consideration the blood shift. And like the blood shift is helping the lungs to withstand the vacuum, let's say, or the negative pressure, because the pressure building up and therefore in the lungs is causing a negative pressure. But the blood shift counteracts that. And this in conjunction with getting the rib cage, diaphragm really more flexible, allows the lungs to go very small and therefore withstand a lot of pressure.
Or did you practice much your turn? Like, you get to the halfway point, which is you're down below, and, you have to stop and turn around and then head back up. Do you actually practice the turning, your turning technique and trying to conserve energy during the turn? Do you have a special sort of technique or approach when you're at the halfway point, as in right down below?
Well, the turn in the beginning, actually in the pool, I did practice a turn because it's not super easy because of using a monofin, for example. But for deep diving, I also practiced a bit. But this is not super. It is essential, but it's not so difficult. Yeah. That part. It's. Yeah, in the beginning, I was the first one using monofin for deep diving because most people, it was general rule that bifins are used. They've been used for decades, and therefore they thought this is the only way to do it. And I thought, well, speed fin swimmers always use a monofin. Why? Because they're more efficient. And so I try to use it also for deep diving. And nowadays, there's no one not using it. So throughout my career as a freediver, I implemented and brought a new few gadgets, gear to the sport, which was then frowned upon, laughed upon, like, for example, a neck weight. It's like in the old days, and scuba diving still, you have the weight belt around, like a belt around your waist. But as a freediver, especially when swimming horizontal, you have all the buoyancy in your lungs and all the negative buoyancy in your legs. And as a plane also needs to be in balance to fly safe and efficient, you have to balance it correctly. Because if you have to balance off, you need a lot more energy. And the same when seeing a freediver without a weight belt or a weight belt only around the waist, you will see that he has to swim at an angle all the time, which of course is causing a lot of drag. So for me, it was clear that you have to put the weight as far up as possible, which I did in the very beginning. I took just an old bicycle hose, filled it with lead grains, stapled it with a stapler, and taped it on with the tape on my neck. And this is how I went to competition. Yeah. Actually, this is how I set my first world record in dynamic with fins. Yeah. First, the competition doctor was looking at me like I tried to strangle herself or what. And also nowadays, everyone uses it. There's not a single person that doesn't use it. So things that seem so obvious now, well, back then nobody really thought about it.
Now, I just want to ask about the discipline known as no limit, the no limit freediving. Mm-hmm. Tell us about the no limit discipline. What does that mean? And what is the no limit version?
Well, I first started with swimming down with fins as deep as possible. And then I talked to some champion about no limit, as champion limit. And I always thought that I'm not made for it because I can equalize as deep as necessary. And at the same time, I thought no limit, where you actually depend on a diving sled, which is basically pulled down by weight on it and propelled back up with a lift bag. It sounds very simple. It's a very simple and rudimentary things the sleds were made and are still made. And I looked at those into it a bit. I found a technique how to overcome the pressurization problem by inventing a new technique with the so-called EQEX, equalization extension tool, which in the beginning was a balloon which I hold by ordinary funnel. Just I start with on the surface with it being empty, and then make a stop at back then it was a little over 20 meters, and then fill all my lung air volume inside. And then at a later state, when going deeper, I took back sip by sip, just in the mouth and sinus to equalize, not back in the lungs. And these are used in the beginning on the sled to equalize, but also for the sled itself, I didn't want to depend on a very basic system which consisted of only one lift bag. This was so prone to failure that, I didn't want to depend on that. So for me, in the beginning, this was a challenge to overcome, to find a different system that is safer. So in the beginning, it was as simple as that, as adding 2 lift bags and 2 valves and two tubes to fill the lift bags. So I have a safety there. Well, most aircrafts also have more than one engine for that particular reason. In case one fails, you can still go. Yeah. And the lift bag is something that is really failing a lot. I had it happen before many, many times in the beginning, that there's so many little bits and pieces that can fail and do fail all the time. And this is also why, unfortunately, very unfortunately, many freedivers died just because of that very stupid and basic mistake of just relying on this simple sled.
Just with the actual sled for listeners, how long is the sled? It's about 4 meters, is it, or from end to end?
No, it's longer. It's I think almost like it's something between 5 and 7 meters. Yeah. No, exactly. Well, it was not one sled I made. Like in the beginning, my sled was only consisting of 2 lift bags, and then I had a solid shape above my head, like without any lift backs, just a solid foam covered with carbon and so on. And then to the last sled, the yellow sled, where it was very, very long, like a torpedo, with a solid shaped lift back, with two big scuba bottles in the bottom, also in a tube to streamline it. So it was like a torpedo, super streamlined, and therefore also super fast. I was told in the beginning I was trying to find a solution how to achieve a bigger speed. Speed is less important just for a breath hold. The most important part is because of limiting the time below 100 meters because of buildup of gases in the body. The decompression sickness is caused when staying too long, too deep. Yeah. And therefore, I needed to go fast as possible, but also using a very efficient technique of equalization to allow me to go too fast, which I did with this balloon and then like a plastic bottle and then plastic bottles glued together. This sled, first I tried to get information from different specialists, and the conclusion was it is impossible to construct a thing according to rules going down with weight and buoyancy only without engine that fast. So I was forced to sit back on the drawing board and construct it myself on the computer. And then I went yet to other specialists to build that out of fiberglass and carbon. Yeah. And they told me, well, the way you planned it, that's impossible to achieve. And but already in the process of organizing the whole event with sponsors and divers and the whole shebang, I was, okay, I'll do it myself. I was a bit discouraged that experts told me it's impossible. But I said to myself, well, I tried anyway. So I did it with a friend in the garage. I worked the first time with carbon and built the whole shape out of with a CNC machine. And you know what? I learned working with carbon is super easy. Yeah. And you can build stuff you can imagine out of it. And the whole thing in the water then was working better than all experts thought it was possible even. I had to even slow it down because it was going too fast, which, was thought really possible. And not only fast, but also safe. Because this last sled had so many backup systems and automatic systems that the whole thing would run automatically, would decrease speeds automatically, and also return by itself without me doing anything. And also, I can override the automatics at any time. And the automatics, in the end, really saved my life.
Yeah. So if we just talk about, go back to the 6th of June 2012, you made an attempt on your own world record. G'day guys, Matt here. This podcast is a labour of love and all episodes are researched, scheduled, edited, created and promoted in my spare time. Typically, after an episode has been recorded, it can take another 3 hours of post-production activities to get the final cut. If I'm providing you with value and you wish to support my vision of sharing these inspirational stories to the world, you can do so at borntokickass.com and click on the Patreon banner. Your support will help to maintain the monthly podcast running costs and enable me to outsource repetitive tasks so I can bring you even more kick-ass episodes. Once again, if you want to support me in producing this podcast, head over to borntokickass.com and click on the Patreon banner. You can't miss it. And now back to the rest of the show. So if we just talk about, go back to the 6th of June 2012, you made an attempt on your own world record. Mm-hmm. You got the world record that day of 253 meters. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about? I was mentioning to you sort of off air that I'd watched a documentary by Red Bull on you on that day. It's called Back from the Abyss. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you maybe step us through, that day as you, prepared to descend and, attempt a new world record?
Yeah, well, let me start by how it should be done and how I planned it to do. Like on the record before on 240 meters, I planned to make a short stop as shallow as about 10, 15 meters to fill all my air in the Coke bottle to allow me to equalize fast and deep. Then I take that air out sip by sip just to equalize as I descend further. Once I hit the bottom, I return. I don't have to equalize on the way up. And then about 100 meters, I would reduce the speed. And at around 30, 40 meters, I would get off the sled and then reduce the speed further and come to a complete stop at about 10 meters and stay there for another minute to allow the body to decompress, like you would do in scuba diving, to off-gas the buildup of excessive CO2, not to cause, you can imagine it like a champagne bottle you open and all the air bubbles and foam is streaming out. This is what happens when you don't get rid of the excessive air that is building up at depth in the body. Yeah. So I planned 1 minute of decompression stop before reaching the surface, still on the same breath hold. And this is what I did on the 240 meter record before that. So I planned more or less the same on the 253 meter record. Yeah. This sled was more advanced, had more automatic systems. For example, slowing down the speed. So let me start from the beginning. I did this preparation, did some last checks myself to see everything is all right. Not only having the team to organize and check all the systems thoroughly over and over again. So then during the dive, I made this stop where filling the plastic bottles, which previously was filled with water, I filled with air from my lungs. And then I descend by taking it out, the air sip by sip equalized, until finally I would hit the bottom. Hitting the bottom would automatically trigger valves of the scuba bottles, releasing the air to fill the lifting device above my head, forcing the water to go out and filling the solid-shaped lift bag. So then I would go up extremely fast. Then around 100 meters, it will slow down a bit. And then something happened that I didn't plan on, that I was a bit wrong in the documentary, because at the very beginning, I didn't know actually what happened. But then by looking over all the videos because this whole dive was documented with a gazillion cameras, including multiple cameras on the sled itself. I could see that I actually fell asleep at 80 meters.
So you fell asleep at 80 meters on your way back up?
On going back up, on the way back up. You could clearly see that in the camera. First, I thought I had a blackout. But then looking at the videos, it's obvious as soon as the sled came to an automatic stop at 24 meters, the safety divers unstrapped me, which they were instructed to do anyway, from the sled, because for safety reasons I was strapped to the sled not to get lost, because the whole sled could be pulled up on the rope in case of emergency anyway. So they unstrapped me, and as they unstrapped me and trapped me, I walked back up. And this is clearly, I could see that, because I was grabbing for the dive rope. Yeah. But because of the speed in the water, my mask slid down, so I couldn't see properly. So I was not getting a hold or the distance of the rope or really to grab it properly. I tried to grab it more than once on the way to the surface, but they brought me to the surface anyway. So I didn't make the planned decompression stop, because for them, it was also a first time that somebody actually fell asleep. Did you just black out because of lack of oxygen? And then the safety procedure is to surface right away to get the patient's oxygen. So they brought me back to the surface without the decompression stop. I immediately knew I have to get oxygen and down as soon as possible, which I planned to do anyway.
So, sorry, can I just ask, so you fell asleep at 80 meters as you were coming back up, and then you came to when they dragged you out of the sled at about 24 meters, and then they dragged you straight up. And where were you supposed to have the decompression stop? At 10 meters?
Yeah, I was supposed to go slowly from 24 meters to 10 meters and stop at 10 meters for another minute before we go up. That was the plan, yes. Yeah. And they didn't do it, of course. I don't blame them at all, because they could know better. Yeah. On the surface, everybody was confused, except I knew I had to go down as quick as possible. This was a bit dramatized in the documentary and also a bit drawn out of proportion. So I took the oxygen. I was even handed it upside down and had to take a mask from some other diver because they couldn't really understand me, even though I was saying it very clear. So I went down on decompression, which I, in any case, planned to do, but I only planned to do it for 5 to 10 minutes. But in that case, I went a lot longer. And after 15 minutes after the dive, after surfacing, the decompression sickness set in. Set in the sense that I got numb extremities that my right body have. My right leg, my right arm was getting numb and more numb as time passed, and I was getting dizzy. And at some point I felt like, well, I'm close to losing it, probably, potentially. And having a blackout underwater, losing consciousness, wasn't a very good prospect. So I decided to abort it, and I signaled before aborting that they should get ready for the emergency chain, which was planned in detail ahead that they knew to bring me with the speedboat to the nearest harbor, ambulance, plane, decompression chamber, and so on.
So were you aware of everything going on, when you, like after you went back down for like 20 minutes or so, were you aware as you were starting to decompress that something was getting worse inside you? Were you aware that of what was going on, or not until you saw the surface?
Naturally, I felt that decompression sickness is kicking in and getting stronger. Yes, you can compare it like when you have a numb leg, when you sit along with crossed legs and then one leg goes numb.
Yeah.
This is more or less how it feels like. And this I had the same with an arm, and getting dizzy and like to the point of seeing blurred, double vision. So I was well aware of it.
So on the way, like when you then surfaced and then they took you, like they sort of knew something was critically wrong, and then they took you via speedboat to, I guess, onwards to hospital. Did you black out at all? Were you still conscious? Or
initially I was conscious, but then I was going unconscious.
Yeah.
And I was in a very bad state as the decompression sickness got worse and worse, obviously. Also, the plane ride wasn't good, I think, even though the plane was instructed and did fly at low altitude not to cause any less pressure, which causes even more decompression sickness. But I want to go back. Maybe there's a question, how could you fall asleep on the water? Because this is what I hear from many so-called specialists. This is a highly unlikely scenario. Well, it's actually not when you know what it's about. And it happened to me before for a different reason. Like after partying and drinking a lot, I decided without sleeping at all, being totally tired and drunk, I went spearfishing. And one technique is to lay at the bottom, close your eyes, look in the sand, and just open your eyes later when the fish get curious what is laying down there. And this is where I first fell asleep underwater, for a short time probably only. But I was like shocked to look at the gauge, how deep I am, how long I have to go to the surface. And it was probably only a few seconds, maybe even half a minute or so, but still, It was little. But if you compare it for the record, obviously I wasn't drunk, but I was super tired because of organizing the whole event and even was signing a contract after midnight still with some sponsors. And then at the same time, you have to be very relaxed before a dive. That you have to be in a state, like it said, of being super relaxed, like waking up on a Sunday morning. And this paired with narcosis on diving deep, because narcosis is something natural that happens to anybody that dives deep, especially known to scuba divers, that the nitrogen in the body gets narcotic at depth. Narcosis is similar to being drunk from alcohol or other drugs, I guess.
Yeah.
So pair this being drunk from narcosis and being relaxed because of using less oxygen caused me to fall asleep. And and taking this in combination, being narcotic, drunk, and being super relaxed state anyway just caused me to fall asleep. And people also think that you will naturally inhale on falling asleep. Yeah. Well, when falling asleep, for example, when you're reading a book, you don't drop the book right away. It's just a gray zone where you fall asleep and you still hold the book, maybe. It's like when you hold your breath and falling asleep, it's not just that you're continuing to breathe. You have to start breathing. And also, I didn't have the urge to breathe. So you wouldn't start to breathe unless after some time passes. And eventually, yes, you will start to breathe, but probably you will wake up first.
When you got to the hospital, did they put you straight into a hyperbaric chamber?
Well, this is something that drives me crazy when thinking about it. I'm really mad about it. That they first got me to the chamber right away and started the treatment as they were supposed to. But then they made some tests of some gas saturation in the lungs, in the tissue and blood, and the values were way off the scale. But so much off the scale that is impossible to have. It's straight out impossible. So rather than making another test, they aborted the whole thing, the whole treatment, the very essential first treatment. Well, this crucial, very first treatment of decompression chamber was aborted right in the beginning. And then the second treatment, or the first real treatment, was only a lot of hours afterwards, like 6 hours even 12 hours after the first attempt to make a treatment. Yeah. And you know what? It's not hours that count, it's minutes that count. Yeah. So this failure of making the first treatment caused all the problems. And this is I'm really pissed off about.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been a critical mistake that they made there. How long were you in hospital for?
I was in the hospital for half a year.
Yeah.
Well, already with some rehabilitation. In the beginning, my brain was definitely goldfish. My memory was raised out totally. I didn't have any memory at all. I didn't even know the names of my best friends. Yeah. I didn't even know any password. I didn't know how to operate my own computer, despite what all the programs were for. I had difficulties to find the words. I couldn't even speak. And despite all the mental problems, of course, I couldn't walk at all, so I was wheelchair bound. And I was overheard by doctors that this will ruin the way for my entire life. So I wasn't so happy about that.
Yeah.
And I was about to give up and stop right away.
Yeah. Where did you draw the strength from to continue battling and continue that fight to try and recover somewhat?
Well, in the beginning, when I thought about it and was in a very bad state, the hospital was in the second floor only. So I thought about 26 floors back home where I live in Vienna is a much safer option to jump. So I postponed my suicidal ideas to a safer option. And luckily back then, I changed my mind because of having some success initially, also about exceeding the expectations of the doctors, that my rehabilitation went a lot better than was expected.
Yeah.
But not necessarily because I followed the treatment of the doctors, but probably and mainly because I didn't follow them. I took the rehabilitation in my own hands, including doing some mental exercises, doing some balance exercises, learning how to ride a bicycle again, simple as that, trying to walk and move, balance, standing on one leg and so on, and finding back the coordination, eating healthy food, because I found that the hospital food, I wouldn't even eat it when I was not sick. So I realized that even though I was eating kind of healthy back then already, I realized that food is very, very essential. So I went even more extreme with my diet. I don't know anybody that eats more healthy than I do, I think.
Tell us about your diet. What does your diet look like? Or what did your diet look like during that rehab period? Was it just slowly but surely got more healthy. For example, now I don't eat any processed sugar, nothing, no sweets at all, except fruit sugar directly from fruits. I don't eat any white flour, no meat, no fish, no milk. So there's a lot of things that are very unhealthy and very unnatural for the body to digest, to eat. But in our society, and it's common practice and almost knowledge that these things are good for you and essential. But in fact, there's many other things that are very good for you, like nuts, seeds, grain, roots, veggies, and so on. Do you juice
Beans.
Do you juice?
I do in the morning. I have like a blend of fruits, for example, all the time. Like different fruits all the time, depending on what fresh fruits I get, or even lemon juice just in the morning before that. Just not lemon juice from a bottle, just a real lemon squeezed with water. And then a fruit smoothie consisting of different fruits blended, and that's it. Nothing added except water.
Do you go any like veggie? Do you put like any greens in there at all, spinach or kale at all, or just go?
Sometimes
fruit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I mix some veggies in the fruits. Not necessarily, because I would eat it at a later state anyway.
So, how important do you think the your diet and nutrition helped with your rehab? Do you think it was a key component of helping you recover somewhat?
I think nutrition is very, very important for everybody. I think in our daily life and society that it has a way too little importance, and even more when you're sick. Medicine usually just covers up the symptoms and doesn't really heal the body, doesn't allow the body to heal even. Yeah. So for me, it was clear not to eat any medicine. First of all, I was given many different medicine from doctors. And I was asking for leaflets about it. And then I was told, well, a patient should know what about leaflets, what the details about the medicine. And then after insisting on it, I got them and said, well, I want to take off some very strong medicine with strong side effects. But then the doctors didn't want to do that. So I decided on myself just to stop taking them without them knowing. Initially only a few and then all. And let them believe that I still take them. I took them, but I took them to throw out the window. Then eventually I thought it's not maybe so good if some birds eat that, so I flush it in the toilet or sink. Yeah. So I think it's very important to let the body heal, to assist it with a healthy diet, and not intervene too much with modern medicine. There's so many, the body is a miracle, and you can support this miracle instead of fighting it.
What about tea and coffee?
I drink a lot of tea, yes, yep. Mainly green tea, yep. Or teas. Certainly no coffee. Yeah. No, coffee I never drank, actually. Yeah. I like the smell of it, not so much the taste. And also coffee is super unhealthy. So coffee is definitely also a no-no for me.
I got to admit, in that documentary, you look pretty in shape still. You know, during the rehab process, your physique looked super healthy.
I think if you eat healthy, there's no way to gain any fat. It's impossible. I have the problem of keeping my weight, actually. I can eat as much as I can and don't really gain a lot of weight. The only way I gain weight is to do exercise and to gain muscle weight. Yeah. And general fitness, I do anyway. Like if it's some very basic stuff, I don't go to the gym for probably a decade already. But I do work out quite regularly if it's just push-ups, pull-ups, or some weights I have at home, or stationary bike, or swimming. Yeah, you call it. And I think it's very important to keep the body fit. Fit body, fit mind.
Just as well, with your rehab, were you going back to some of the breathing techniques that you utilised during your diving career to help with rehabilitation? You know, like breathing on the couch or in the bed. You know, I guess alkalizing your blood. And were you using breathing techniques, you know, in hospital to help with your recovery?
Breathing techniques by itself, not. But this knowledge I had from freediving about all the body functions and the correlations and interactions, this knowledge I used to apply it to getting in shape, of course. Because just many people know a lot more about the car than about their own body. Like, or they put octane 100 fuel in the car at the gas station and go inside and buy some chips and some sodas. But you only have one body in life. Maybe some spare parts, yes. Some legal, some illegal spare parts, organs. But if you treat your organs and your body the best way, I think you can get way beyond that. And I think also that 99% of the modern diseases are just caused by diet and lifestyle.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, diet's a big one, and your lifestyle. And
Well, when I was sick, when I was young, I ate only sweets, only. From my birth to my late teenage years, I only ate sweets. And yeah, I had hay fever, this chronic bronchitis, asthma, neurodermitis, acne, you call it.
yeah.
And back then I thought that's just the way it is, bad genes, whatever. But now it's obvious it was just diet. As simple as that.
What is your like a normal sort of meal look like for you, either lunch or dinner? Is it like a massive salad? Do you sort of mainly go?
I eat some salads or veggies or even some whole wheat pastas or so.
Do you put any dressing on your salad?
A lot of roasted nuts. Yeah. I love roasted nuts. And I think they're good with almost everything there is.
What about dressing?
And it's super healthy.
Do you put dressing on your salad at all or not?
I use some basilicum probably, and maybe some lemon juice.
Yeah.
Like lemon is instead of using vinegar, I use lemon.
So that happened in 2012. How's your recovery today, sort of 5 years later? Are you still struggling with a lot of things, or have you slowly? I'm guessing it's going to be an ongoing thing from here on in.
Well, on land, I still have some issues with balance, and especially when I'm cold, and with articulation also. But in coordination, in the sense I cannot write with my right hand properly. But luckily nowadays you mostly write on keyboards anyway. That's working fine. Yeah. And in the water, everything is back to normal. I've been training in 2014 already. Of course, despite the doctors told me not to. And just to see how things are going. And I was diving before, but really training, how to go to dive deep again. Yeah. I was even considering about making another record. And then already after the third day, I was back to where I was before. And so this proved to me that underwater everything is back to normal. Yeah. But I decided, at least for the moment, not to go for further records because I don't feel the urge so much to prove myself anymore than I did already.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you could give some advice to someone who's wanting to get into the sport of freediving, are there any sort of tips or advice that you could give someone wanting to take on this sport?
Well, there's many. I don't know where to start. One thing is that, for example, on my start, it is obviously good to to listen to others, experts, and also, of course, beginners, just to see how to get better, and then find your own way of becoming better, and learning your body and learning how to control it, and identify what your weakest link is. Like if what you're good at, yes, but don't focus on that. To work on that, on the weakest link, what is slowing it down. Because, for example, if you Limit is equalization. Well, there's no point in practicing swimming or whatever. If equalization is it, practice equalization. If the turn is it, practice turning. You don't need to dive deep to practice that. You can practice that in short too. So it's taking it apart and concentrating on the weakest link. And also visualize and believe you can do it. Even though that others, experts, whatever, might tell you that you can't or try to discourage you, don't give up and believe in yourself and make it happen one way or the other. Yeah. Because in the end, there is no limit.
Yeah. Do you think your current record of 253 meters or 830 feet, do you think someone down the track could get 900 feet, 1,000 feet? You know, I think they were your original plan to sort of get to those depths. Do you think a human being can get down that far on a single breath?
Well, back then, obviously, I did think so, and I still believe so, that it's humanly possible to dive to 1,000 feet. I also think that you could go deeper. It's just that it's the risks get higher when you go a lot deeper. Yeah. So I think going to 1,000 feet is perfectly possible. If someone will actually do it is another question, because it takes a lot of planning, organization, and you can do it less safe, of course, but to make it safe is actually involving a lot of things.
Yeah, the planning would be, you'd need to be meticulous with the planning and all the safety and the backup and the testing, and all of it would be, an ordeal in itself.
Yeah, well, the first sled was only like 2,000 euros maybe, but the last sled was $250,000.
Oh, really?
Not only the sled, but also the safety system and everything.
Yep. Just out of interest, you mentioned you were an airline pilot. The training that you had as an airline pilot, you know, with all the safety procedures and all the checks, you know, all the safety checks, did that translate into the freediving planning and logistics?
Good that you ask. Well, initially, I wasn't aware of it. That I was thinking this is the way people think. But then I learned, well, actually not. Because this really caused me to change that, to think that you always analyze things and make a checklist, safety plan, and really work things out A through Z. And this organization, thinking in detail about it, this is hardly done in any job I don't know of. Yeah. And I thought that's normal, but this is something I did throughout my freediving, that I really analyzed the heck out of it to know what I'm good at, what I'm bad at, how to improve it, and how the whole system, my body, works. Yeah. Yeah, well, because, as a pilot, you have to know the system for the airplane in detail. Well, as a freediver, you have to know what the body does and how to influence it. Like I said, the diving reflex. It's not only that, that it exists, but how to influence it, how to train it, and how to make it more efficient, and also how to induce it even before the dive, which I do all the time.
Yeah, no, it's been fascinating speaking with you. Whereabouts can people find you online?
I have a website, herbertnitsch.com. Yeah. And I'm on most social medias. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you call it, Weibo, and so on.
Yeah, cool. I'll put all those links in the show notes. But it's been fascinating speaking with you. It's quite an honour to speak to, you've set all these world records, 33 world records, and you've dived deeper than any other.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it is quite incredible. But yeah, thanks again for your time, and good luck with everything in the future.
Yes, well, yeah. That leads me to the one last thing, the future. Yeah? I'm actually, you know what the most difficult part in my life was, actually?
What?
It's not the career, it's not the flying, it's not the diving, not any record. It's the writing, which I just finished now, my biography.
Yeah. So you got a biography out now, do you, or is it coming out?
No, it's coming out. It's still in the editing phase now.
Yeah.
And I hope it's coming out towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And I'm busy with designing an eco boat where I intend to live on half year of the year. Eco boat meaning with solar and wind power only, with no fossil fuels.
That'd be good.
And spending time on it, living on it,
Well, where do you plan
solar power or hydrogen?
Where do you plan to sail? Just around the Mediterranean, or are you gonna?
No. There's no fish left.
Oh, okay.
So yes, it depends on also. I didn't decide yet where to actually build a boat.
Yep.
Depending if I do it in Europe, I will start out in the Mediterranean Sea, of course. But I don't know how long it will stay here. Yeah. Then probably go to the Caribbean and eventually the Pacific. South Pacific is probably something nice to aim for.
Yeah, that'd be good. The fishing. Be good.
And I'm actually since 3 years on the advisory board of Sea Shepherd. Do you know this? The non-profit organization Sea Shepherd. Yeah. Because also when being all those different remote places for diving, I realized not only all this overfishing, but also there's plastic pollution all over you look for. In the most remote place, I've been to Komodo, and the water was so filthy, full of plastic, that I couldn't take any picture of that without any plastic inside that picture. And they were fishing. I've been the first time diving as a small child in the Maldives. And I've been there 2 years ago, and you know what? Back then it was like swimming in an aquarium, and now in 2 weeks I saw one baby shark.
Really?
So that's people are not aware of the overfishing, the fish population and richness has drastically reduced. To a few percent only.
Yeah.
And it's soon going to be dead if nobody is doing something against it. Yeah. And Sea Shepherd is actively doing something against that, fighting for the laws, reinforcing the laws, because what good are fishing quotas if no one gives a shit about it?
Yeah.
And they enforce it. And also there's so many illegal fishers out there. Yeah, and they control, check, and stop illegal fishers, help the authorities. Yeah, so I think it's a very good cause to support them. You could think from a landlocked country in Austria, you don't really care so much about the sea. Well, not only that I dive abroad, but also in Austria. Well, something you need also in Austria from the sea. which is oxygen.
Yeah.
And most oxygen comes from the sea. And if the animals all dead, they're extinct, the oxygen on the whole planet will be less.
Yeah. Yeah, it is
so,
a good cause.
Yeah, this whole ecosystem and balance is, if it's not too late, it's about to be too late. Sounds a bit doomsday scenario. Well, it is very bad, actually.
Yeah, they reckon
and people are not aware of it. And I try to spread awareness. I give a lot of lectures, mainly for banks, big corporations, about risk management, stress management. And if they want or not, I always talk about Sea Shepherd to spread the word, to cause awareness that shit happens in the world.
Yeah. Well, yeah, plastic's a big one. Like they reckon there's the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. They reckon that's like the size of Texas, I think.
Yeah, but you know what? It's everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, if you stick your head on the water, plastic is everywhere. And, well, the overfishing is another part, and the atomic waste is another part. And, so it's a never-ending story about that. Yeah, so I give a lot of lectures to corporates, mainly about risk management and stress management, also because of my background as a pilot and so on, but also from risk of doing extreme sports. Yeah. But I also think that maybe brings me to the point that if you do something potentially dangerous, well aware of it, it's less dangerous than daily risk you take without being aware of it. Like we take a risk every day, just if it's participating in traffic, and household accidents, falling downstairs, cutting yourself, whatever. It sounds so. Yeah, that doesn't happen to me. But did you know that like 1.2 car accidents happen a year, 1.2 million? And people are afraid of sharks. Well, I think it's about 6 people that die a year from sharks. Yeah. 6
the odds
compared to 1.2 million from traffic. Yeah. It's more. It's. I think it's twice or 3 times more likely that you get killed from a falling coconut than from a shark.
Yeah, the media blows it out of proportion.
Yeah, well. Media nowadays is more and more sensationalizing it and everything. Yeah.
Well, thanks again for coming on, and appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll keep in touch, and I'll keep an eye out for your bio, your book when it comes out towards the end of the year. But thanks again for coming on, and it's been great speaking with you.
And thank you. And if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to give me a ring.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, thanks, Herbert.
Good. All right.
Okay, cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, see ya.
Bye-bye.
You've just been listening to the Born to Kick-Ass podcast at borntokickass.com. If you liked what you heard and want more, please subscribe on iTunes. Give a 5-star rating and a kick-ass review. This really helps to boost our presence and continues to allow us to introduce you to the most fascinating people on the planet. Welcome aboard, and catch you next time.